Hi everyone. In today's episode of Not So Mainstream, I have with me Hayley and Ashna from Anti-Heroine Media. That is a creative communication studio specializing in intersectional, feminist digital storytelling and advocacy. I mean, just reading about it feels so powerful, and we will be talking in detail about this whole venture in today's episode. But to start with, I want each one of you to tell us something about yourself, your background, and how did you both come together to form this amazing venture?
Yeah, sure. My background is specifically in communications, digital campaigning, and I work primarily with different feminist coalitions on strategic messaging for about the last 10 years. I've also worked with a lot of community-based organizations on using art for social good. Over the last 5 years, I've been working with different nonprofits on communications.
Great. What about you, Hilly?
So my background is also in digital communications. I ran the social media accounts at a nonprofit for a few years, also doing digital campaigns, graphic design, and specifically in feminist podcasting is an area. I produced the podcast at my previous position called When Feminists Rule the World, which talked to feminist change makers from different parts of the world about different issues that were impacting us and incorporating global perspectives. And then prior to that, my background's actually in film. I studied film. I did my undergrad and my master's, and specifically in representation around anti-heroine characters. So it's all aligned.
That's great, and it feels so good to hear that how you kind of like blended all the experiences from the past work into this creative studio that you are doing right now. So to start with, like my first question to you is, because whenever we hear or observe traditional media outlets or any kind of communication work out there, there are always some sort of like limitation of how the story is being crafted or communicated, and the reasons could be like multiple, like who is organizing it or who is responsible for the funding, and but you, through your platform, like through your studio, you're literally challenging the status quo. How did you come about this idea?
Sure. So the digital media space in particular, so Ash and I are both digital communicators. That's where our background is, and we thought it was really important to stay in this space. Coming from our old position, we worked at a nonprofit together. We ended up leaving during the pandemic as things kind of became increasingly toxic. I think a lot of folks were facing similar issues during the time, and so it was important to us to stay in the digital media space because it is such a powerful potential in order to democratize media. So as you're saying, the narratives that we're fed, we don't really know where they're coming from or who they're benefiting. And on digital media, literally everybody has a voice. There's pros and cons to that, but it is a space in which we can take advantage of that in order to kind of use it for the social good that we're trying to create.
Yeah, and I think a big part of that is just our approach to communications is like an intersectional approach, and that means that we really take into consideration the lived experiences of the folks whose stories that we're going to be telling, but also the folks who are going to be engaging with the information and receiving the information on the other end. So it's like we think about the barriers that they may face in like getting that information.
The gap that we're kind of filling as a creative communication studio is that we're at this moment in history, we're being like constantly bombarded with information, and particularly like bad news, as lots of issues are kind of coming to a head. And so while we're overwhelmed with data, how do we make the messaging that's important? How do we make that stand out? How do we make that come through for people? So our role is to make information accessible, as Ashna was saying, considering the barriers, making it really like clear and easy to understand, to make it engaging so that it kind of stands out from all of the noise, and so that we can like really work with the information and it feels like malleable. And then lastly, to make it feel action driven, because as we're inundated with information, you can become kind of paralyzed. It feels like there's nothing you can do, and it leads to kind of apathy. But we want to make it very clear what your next step is, like what action you can take in order to kind of to push against existing power structures to challenge the status quo.
Perfect. And I really like the point that you make about being action driven, because obviously like in when we see communication or any kind of like digital content out there, most of it is just content, like what's the next step, right? So I mean that makes your whatever you do more unique, and it reaches out to more people, and it's more organic, I would say, which is great. And with that, I want to ask you about let's talk about courage. It takes a lot amount of courage and bravery to start your own business. And you told me that, you started this like 3 years ago, which was also the time duration we were in the pandemic and we're dealing with everything. But it's also very adventurous and extraordinary. I want you to share with us what challenges did you face and how did you overcome with it?
I think we can just start by saying that like neither of us have business backgrounds. And I think that has been like one of the biggest challenges. Hayley and I, we both come from the nonprofit world. And although we have like a really good kind of like basis around social justice issues, in terms of like the day-to-day of business and like owning a business and like managing a business, we've had to learn everything from scratch. And if you are, if you're watching and like you've started a business or you're hoping to start a business, the information that you find online is like very contradictory. Like we couldn't find clear answers for a lot of our questions. And so we've been like really relying on like our network and our families and our friends who have like uplifted us and like supported us for the past couple of years and really encouraged us to keep going. So I think the not having business backgrounds, but also just like being young women has been, being young women in these spaces. I think just like as women in the workplace, we often feel that we are, I wouldn't use the word like imposter syndrome, but essentially just like feeling like our work is undervalued. And so like when you add like a business lens to that, it has been quite challenging just for us to create space and carve space for us to be our authentic selves as we have become like business owners.
For sure. I would just add to that, like Ashna and I are both very progressive people. And a big challenge for us, like being like owning and operating a business with our kind of like intersectional feminist values, is how do we reconcile like our approach and our principles with like owning and running a business in a capitalist society? Like how do we like rethink and unlearn the way that businesses are typically approached? Like what does that look like for us? We're trying to create a completely horizontal business structure. We split everything 50-50. We both take on different roles. We don't look at work in a way where like it's between 9 to 5 and your productivity is your value. For us, like we have different strengths and we really want to encourage each other and help each other grow and have all of our work really be based in care. And the same goes for our relationships with our clients and the partners that we work with.
And what I like, I mean, besides the work that you do for your clients or, the services that you offer, your whole business itself is like an example of like your own like intersectional feminist approach, because as Ashna mentioned that, it is true, like it is structural, like, women at workplaces, they're undervalued and all those structural barriers that we face. But creating something on the premises of feminism and promoting it like that, I think it's, again, as an example, like it will be really good for people who are following you.
Thank you. I'll also add that I think like a lot of businesses are, the way that businesses are designed are like kind of a manifestation of the way that like society is designed in terms of like, it's like a microcosm of the issues that we face out in our communities and out in the world. So Hayley and I are like, we know that there could be a different world, and like we really want to start on the ground with each other and prove that, like, you know, if we're collaborating meaningfully and like caring for one another, and we're really extending care to our clients, that this is the type of world that we want to see as well. And we can start in the workplace.
Perfect. And that takes courage, which you both are showing, which is amazing. I really, really appreciate it. Right. So there's this one statement that I saw online on your social media and website, which says the medium is the movement. And I find it so powerful. It has, like, you know, it has so many connotations, like people can have different perceptions around it, but I want you to tell us, how do you foresee the power of media, especially in the domain that you are approaching it, in the coming years, to change the world for better or for worse? Like, what will happen? Like, how do you foresee the whole phenomenon?
Yes, let's start with the bad so that we can like end on a more positive note. But I would say, like, we work specifically in digital media. Of course, traditional media is a big part of our job in monitoring that and seeing how narratives are being communicated. But in the digital media space, obviously there's a lot of abuse, and it's often targeted towards folks who are already structurally excluded. So that is something that we have to be really proactive and cognizant about, and think critically about how we can create safer digital spaces in order to be able to use digital media like at its greatest potential for change and for challenging existing narratives, existing power structures.
And like, I think it's, you know, when we think about when there's like different forms of resistance that happen that we like, you know, see in our communities or around the world, a lot of times the first thing that ends up coming down or being like shadow banned on Instagram, or like the internet is being taken down, it's because there is such a deep understanding from all of us that like digital media is so powerful, and like it really is able to connect us to folks who are experiencing, you know, and like resisting violence on the ground. And like to be able to directly hear from folks is something that didn't exist like 20 years ago. So our role as communicators and like as folks who are engaging with this information is really to amplify and to understand that like when we're, you know, when folks are sharing or using digital media, it really is like a connector of being able to connect with folks in your community, being able to reach people across oceans and across communities.
I think just like building movements, it's really scary to, you know, governments and the ruling class to be able to see us connect with each other, because that's when we have the greatest impact. As individuals, we're not going to change the world. As movements, as like groups of people coming together and connecting and holding governments accountable and demanding our rights, demanding change, that's when we have the greatest impact. And so in order for us to be able to do that, we need to find each other. Digital media and media in general is the tool that we can use to find each other and to connect with each other, to then translate that into real world action.
Yeah, it's like we're finding ourselves in spaces where we might not necessarily share those rooms with other people. It's so powerful.
It is. And I think we have seen examples in the past, like I like see the progress is slow because obviously we have so many other barriers to deal with, but there are examples which have proven to be, you know, the movements that we have seen which created a change on a bigger and structural and, you know, systemic level. So it has a lot of potential. It is powerful. So if we can create this awareness, I guess, like the way you are doing it, I think we can, you know, speed up the process of what you want to achieve through that. Right. So anything you want to add into that? I think you covered the good and the bad in between the answer. But if you want to add something else in that, feel free to do that.
I think we're good. Yeah, I think just digital media is a tool to build movements. Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing that. So my next question to you is that can you share something about your favorite project that created an impact or that you really enjoyed working on?
Yeah, so Hayley and I, last year we worked in collaboration with Oxfam Canada on, it was called the Feminist Economic Transformation Project, and it's actually still ongoing. It involved us developing like a suite of like creative products. And there was a lot of like possibility and like openness around how we engaged with them. But essentially the context, I'll let Hayley maybe describe a little bit. Yeah.
So Oxfam Canada was working with feminist visionaries around the world to come together and envision what a feminist economic future could look like in practice. And it was like, just so inspiring to be able to hear the literally the sessions were structured around like, what does the sky look like? Like, what do our homes look like 50 years from now? If we've achieved what we want to achieve, what does healthcare look like? And our job was to come in and kind of make that information, to visualize it and make that information accessible and engaging for folks to be able to come. We created we designed a microsite that exists online that has also like video recaps from the visioning sessions and a zine that shows you you can have your own visioning session. And the visuals for it were so like bright and bold and dreamy and dynamic. And it was just such a pleasure to be able to collaborate with like amazing feminist thinkers around how we could communicate that material.
And there was it was so interesting how they like engaged with like poets and like artists, and like it was just so holistic in the way that they were envisioning like a feminist future. And to be able to, think about what that could look like in practice was our role as communicators. And it was just very, very visual and bold. And it's so exciting to us because I feel like our work in practice is so much about envisioning what this future could look like. So to be able to be given kind of this openness around like, and being creative. Also, I will add that like our relationship, that working relationship was so rooted in like trust and care and collaboration that like, it made it easier for us to like come out with something that like we were both really happy with, and that was received really well on like folks who did end up engaging with it. So yeah.
Perfect. And that really sounds amazing. And again, I'm using this word again and again, that the work that you do in the campaigns, it's really powerful. So thank you that you're doing it. Like, it's good for everyone to see and get inspired from. Moving to our last question, which is directed to each of you. One thing you want to tell to your future self 10 to 20 years down the line. It could be work, or about your personal like achievement around Anti-Heroine Media, anything. So floor is yours.
I can start. Okay, you go first.
Okay, I really love this question because I feel like oftentimes we get asked what we would tell ourselves in the past. Yeah. So this made me think outside of that, and I thought about it a lot. And my answer, so what I would tell my future self 10, 20 years from now is to slow down. I feel like a lot of, when I think back to, especially the last, my young adulthood, even circling around like the workplace, it really has been influenced by kind of this hustle culture of like go, 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 and productivity. And that's like a symptom of capitalism, which like Hayley and I are really being intentional about like trying to, work outside of that. And, like in the long term, we'd love to have like 4-day work weeks, etc. So I would tell myself to slow down, smell the flowers, take the walk during my lunch hour, and like really be able to like meaningfully engage with what I'm doing day to day. So that's my answer.
That's beautiful. Thank you. What about you, Hayley?
I struggled with this question a lot. I would say I want to remind my future self that work is work. And I say that meaning that so often, like Ashna was talking about hustle culture and capitalism, but like so often our work becomes conflated with like our sense of identity, and it becomes like all consuming. And especially for folks who are working on stuff that they're passionate about, it can kind of like take that role. And I want to remind myself that it is just it's important, but it is your work, and you should have a life outside of that. and the room to be creative and to have fun and find joy and like community and your friends and family, and that those are the most important things.
Amazing. And you both kind of like give me a reminder as well what I should be doing with life. So that is beautiful. Thank you.
It's really hard. It's really
hard
to
keep that balance. And especially what the point that Hayley touched on, like when you're creative and passionate about like what you do, it kind of like really consume, because you're always in a mode to do stuff and go out there and achieve things. But it is important to take care of yourself and your family, friends, things that are gonna last longer than the work that we do, for sure. Amazing. So I had amazing time talking with you, and we look forward to you do amazing things in your area of work. What I will do is I will share your social media links in the description of this video so that people can go and see what you do and see what you offer, and just get connected with you, because this is, again, like it's a business, but at the same time it's a movement. So that, like, you know, people should be really, you know, joining you guys and creating this community. It's beautiful, it's powerful, it's amazing. So thank you, Hayley and Ashna, for your time. I enjoyed our conversation, and everyone who's watching, I'll see you in the next video. Thank you.
Thank you
So much.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.